Jake was a night shift taxi driver in the misty streets of London. He enjoyed the calm of the late hours, but tonight felt different. Near Tower Bridge, he saw a woman waiting for a ride. She was dressed in an old-fashioned style, as if she had stepped straight out of the 1920s. As soon as she entered the taxi, an eerie chill filled the air. Her face was pale, and in a soft voice, she asked, "Can you take me to West End?" Jake nodded and started driving. He kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, but strangely, he could never quite focus on her face. It was like his eyes refused to see her clearly. Halfway through the ride, the radio suddenly changed stations by itself. A static-filled voice whispered strange words, and an old, haunting melody echoed through the car. Jake's hands trembled on the wheel. He glanced back once more. This time, the seat was empty. Panicked, he pulled over and turned to check the back seat. All he found was an old newspaper lying there. The headline read, "Young woman found dead near Tower Bridge, dated 1923. Staring at the printed photo, he realized it was the same woman he had just picked up. Jake never drove that route again, but some say the ghostly woman still haunts the streets, looking for a ride to the West End that she never reached. Carlos had been driving a taxi in New York for years, and he'd seen all kinds of passengers. But the man he picked up that night at Times Square was different. Dressed in an old-fashioned suit, he clutched a crumpled map and asked, "Can you take me to this hotel?" Carlos glanced at the map and felt uneasy. The hotel's name sounded familiar, but he was sure it had been demolished years ago. Nevertheless, he agreed to take the man to the location. The passenger remained silent throughout the ride, staring out the window. When they arrived at the address, Carlos found nothing but an empty lot. Turning to inform his passenger, he discovered the seat was vacant. In disbelief, he noticed an old hotel key resting on the seat. It had the number 1955 engraved on it. Curiosity got the better of him, and he searched the hotel online. It had burned down in 1955, taking several tourists' lives with it. From that night on, Carlos couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched every time he drove near Times Square. Kenji was a seasoned taxi driver in Tokyo, used to driving through the city's rain-soaked streets. On a particularly gloomy night, he spotted a woman standing near an old shrine. She was dressed in a long black coat, and her wet hair covered most of her face. Without a word, she slid into the back seat and whispered, "To the city center, please." Kenji nodded and started driving. The rain hit the windshield heavily, but something about the woman unsettled him. Every time he glanced in the mirror, he saw her staring blankly out the window, her eyes dark and distant. Suddenly, the car was filled with the scent of incense and withered flowers. Kenji's grip tightened on the wheel, and he glanced back only to find the back seat empty. He slammed on the brakes and found an old bouquet of flowers where she had been sitting. The next day, he visited the shrine and described the woman to the priest there. The priest sighed and told him, "She took her own life years ago, and every year, she hails a taxi, hoping to reach the city one last time." Kenji avoided the shrine from then on, but on rainy nights, he sometimes felt as if she was still there, watching.